Hey, it's Joe here, sitting here with my Presonus StudioLive Series 3 mixer, and I want to talk to you about fat channel integration. No fat jokes. Fat channel integration sounds fancy, it's not really. It's simply the way of integrating the fat channel on the mixer with the fat channel plugin inside Studio One. Now there's always been a fat channel plugin in Studio One, but only recently have they made it awesome by actually including the same models that they have on the fat channel on the mixer. Now I'll dive into these more in depth in another video, but you've got access to a bunch of different settings and effects inside of the fat channel. So let's say we're listening to this microphone I've got plugged in, and you can't hear it, but you can see that there's signal. I've got a mic plugged in. Let's go to the compressor. Well, there's a standard compressor, which we're all used to, but there's also a couple other compressors like this sweet tube compressor, which looks like an 11.7 or a LA2A, LA3A, or the 1176 looking sucker like this. And we can adjust settings and get a compression sound on this input, and we can hear it directly off the board because it's acting like an actual console. There's no latency, we're hearing it here. That's all well and good. But if you use the fat channel plugin inside of Studio One, these settings can be linked up to where whatever settings are on the board are also in the software and vice versa. So let's do that really quickly. If we look over here in our channel, our list of plugins, fat channel is right there. It's always been there, but only lately has it become something that's cool that I actually use. So as you can see, this looks pretty familiar, right? We've got the compressor here, we can choose our compressor, we've got the EQ, we can choose our different EQs. Let's focus on the compressor for this video just because that's fairly simple. You'll notice a couple things different. If you're used to Studio One, you'll notice there's a little link button here on the plugin, and then there's also one of those here in the inside the plugin as well. If we click that link, something magical happens. Now, whatever the channel is that we're connected to, input 7 on my console, that is now linked with the fat channel on the console and this fat channel plugin. So if we look on the console, you can see on this channel it's set to the tube compressor. If I come into the software and I change it to the 1176 compressor, it also changes on the console. Now, why does that matter? It's not acting like a control surface necessarily, it's actually syncing both of them. Why is that cool? Well, let's say I'm recording a bass guitar, and I decide this would really sound great with a little bit of EQ and like an LA2A compressor on there. And so I dial in a compressor setting, it's sounding amazing, I love it. Well, if I have the fat channel on the track in Studio One, whenever I play back that track, we'll also hear the exact same settings that we have on the channel. So for me, the way I like to track in my studio, if I've got drums, bass, and I'm playing guitar, we're all recording, we all listen off the board. If I've got EQ and compression on there, we're hearing all of that in our headphones. But when I go to play back from Studio One, I don't play back through the same channels. That takes too much work. You have to go switch the inputs of each channel from analog to digital coming out of Studio One. It's just not worth it. What I've always done is I've got a pair of channels on my mixer that I've got labeled DAW, D-A-W, and my Studio One mix comes out of these two channels. So we'll record and we'll hear everything off the board, and then when we listen back, we're listening to basically a 2 mix inside the DAW. That's fine and that works wonderfully, and you don't have to change that. But what you're hearing from the DAW is different from what you're hearing in the room if you've got something like the fat channel on a bunch of your tracks. This solves that problem. So if I've got a sweet compression sound on the bass, and I've also got a sweet EQ and compression sound on the snare drum, if I've got the fat channel on those tracks and I've integrated the two and linked them together, now as soon as I stop recording and I hit playback, we're gonna hear the exact same sound because we've got basically 2 copies of those plugins, one on the board, one in the software, and they're copying and mimicking and mirroring each other the entire time. Now the question you might have is, Joe, can't I just record settings or come up with settings on the board and then record those, print those to the audio track inside of Studio One? Yes, you absolutely can. They actually make that really easy as well. Inside of Studio One, there's also this fat channel switch above your insert section that allows you to apply the DSP, which is the digital signal processing on the board, to the incoming signal. When you hit that button, it is actually changing a setting on the board As you can see, there's a setting for whether we're gonna do digital send or not. Whether we're gonna record, all of our settings are gonna get recorded with the audio onto the audio track inside of Studio One. That is absolutely an option, and I'm actually a big fan of committing to those sounds on the front end. But I'm also a realist, and I realize when you're in a tracking session like that, you may just want to slam the snare and slam the bass just so it sounds big and huge in your ears, but that might not be the final sound that you want. You'll probably want to dial it back to something a little more reasonable once you get into the session. If that's the case, this is a perfect solution. You can dial in some sick sounds. You can listen to them. You're still going to record the dry sounds, but when you play back between takes while you're listening back to what you recorded, it's going to sound exactly like it did on the board because the two plugins are synced together. However, if we come back a week later and we realize, you know what? That was way too much compression on the snare drum. Let's fix that. Well, we just open up the session, grab the plugin, and turn some knobs, and there you go, problem solved. So we have the best of all the worlds. We've got great sounds coming off the mixer. We've got great sounds playing back through the software. We've got connection between the two, so I don't have to sit here and look from one to the other and copy all the settings, which is no one's gonna actually do. We have that integration, and then we have the ability to turn it on and off before, during, or after recording and preserve the underlying audio. To me, that is a stupidly cool feature that you really only get when you're using the StudioLive and you're using Studio One. And because the same company makes both, guess what? The integration works really, really well. I'm sure I will report back in the future after using it on multiple tracking sessions and give you both the pros and the cons. I'm sure there's some downsides to it as well. But just the fact that that's a possibility, and if you own the mixer and Studio One, you have access to that, that's really cool and something I'm really excited about. Love to hear your comments. How would you use the Fat Channel? How would you use this integration in your setup? Do you already use it? Are you planning to use it? What kind of creative ideas do you have for it? Because I'm sure I'm just barely scratching the surface of what's possible. I'm really excited to see what people come up with and how they use this in their own music, in their own studios. All right, that's it for me. Thanks to Presonus for making cool stuff. Thanks to you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.